Hi, boys and girls. This is Ms. Kathy. I'm so happy you've joined me today for another story just for you. Do not be anxious about anything, but in everything, by prayer and petition, with thanksgiving, present your requests to God. Philippians 4:6.
Verloren in Deutschland by Russell Lewis. By the time they finally landed in Germany, Brad was exhausted and every bone in his body ached. He and his dad had been on a plane from San Francisco for 10 hours, and even though it was mid-morning in Germany, it was after midnight at home. As soon as his dad got behind the wheel of the rental car, Brad was sound asleep. The next thing he knew, his dad was shaking his shoulder to awake him. Still groggy from lack of sleep, Brad blinked in the bright sunlight. They were parked in front of a large building. "I'll just let my office know we've arrived," his dad said. "There's a park across the street. Wait for me there. I won't be long." Brad's eyes burned and his legs felt rubbery. He wanted to lie down on one of the park benches, but he forced himself to keep walking to stay awake. When he reached the edge of the park, Brad decided to explore a little farther. He walked slowly through the narrow, crooked streets, looking at the tall buildings crowded close together on each side. Turning a corner, he saw a wide, slow-moving river. He walked along the grassy riverbank and watched the small boats. He was so fascinated that he lost all track of time. Suddenly, Brad realized that his dad would be looking for him in the park. He looked around in all directions, but he wasn't sure which way to go. "I think this street's a shortcut back to the park," he thought to himself. "I should be back in a few minutes." The narrow street jogged to the left, then to the right, then came to a dead end in front of a parking garage. "Wrong, wrong, wrong," Brad muttered. Retracing his steps, Brad took a different street. He could imagine the worried look on his father's face. In panic, he began to run. Down one street, up another, then another. Each narrow street seemed to twist and turn and then go in the wrong direction. Brad's heart was pounding, and his breath came in short gasps. Now he was completely lost. He didn't even know which way to go to get back to the river. Finally, he stopped running and closed his eyes. "Please, God, show me the way back," he prayed. Opening his eyes, Brad turned a corner and stopped in surprise. He was facing a huge square, and in the middle of the square was the largest cathedral he'd ever seen. Its steeple seemed to reach all the way to heaven. He could almost sense God's presence slowly pulling him toward the huge entrance doors. At the entrance stood a boy about Brad's age. "Can you help me?" Brad asked. The boy looked at him with a blank expression. Of course, Brad thought, he doesn't speak English. The boy gave Brad a friendly smile. He pointed to his chest. "Carl," he said. Then he pointed at Brad with a questioning look. Brad immediately understood that the boy's name was Carl and that he wanted to know Brad's name. Brad pointed at his own chest and said, "Brad." Then he acted out picking up a telephone and dialing a number. "Ah, telephone!" exclaimed Carl, his eyes lighting up. Brad was surprised but happy that telephone was said the same way in both languages. He followed as Carl led him across the square to a payphone. Brad wrote the name of his dad's company on a piece of paper and handed it to Carl. Carl looked in the phone book for the number and then put some German coins in the slots. Soon, Brad had explained the situation to the English-speaking secretary at his dad's office. When his dad arrived at the cathedral, he swept Brad into his arms in a big, strong hug. "Here's proof that God answers our prayers," he said. "I prayed that God would keep you safe in his arms, and where did he lead you? Straight to a church." Brad introduced Carl to his dad. His dad spoke German, so he thanked Carl for helping Brad. Then all three went into the cathedral to thank God for watching over them. As they bowed their heads in prayer, Brad thought of Carl praying in German while he prayed in English. Brad smiled as he thought of people all over the world praying to God in different languages. And God understood and answered each one. It's true, Brad thought. God's love is a universal language.
The story you have heard today is from God's Greatest Stories, written by various authors and compiled by Randy Fischel.
and used with permission from the Pacific Press Publishing Association. If you're interested in any other books published by the Seventh-day Adventist Church, please visit AdventistBookCenter.com or call 1-800-765-6955.
This podcast is a production of the Carolina Conference of the Seventh-day Adventist Church.